happy to see you on the screen, as this is, as you know, is the first webinar, the first advanced research seminar organized by the FMER this year, and I'm very pleased to welcome Professor Meredith Vanstone from McMaster University. And as you know, as is customary in our research seminars, they are usually run by students. So today, Raymond and Sima will facilitate the session. So I will stop here, and Raymond, Sima, the floor is yours. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez. Hello, everyone. My name is Raymond. I will help moderate today's webinar with Sima, who will be managing the chat. So we are both master's student in the Department of Family Medicine under the Medical Education concentration. My work focuses on the topics of artificial intelligence and curriculum development and medical education under the supervision of Dr. Samir Rahim.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sima, and I'm working on the topic of family physicians' mental health during infectious catastrophes under supervision of Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Tellier.
So before beginning, I would like to acknowledge the land that McGill is located on. McGill University is located on land which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst indigenous people, including the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations. McGill honors, recognizes, and respects these nations as the traditional stewards of the lands and waters on which we meet today. Furthermore, we would like to acknowledge our PhD colleague and friend, Khalid Umair Siddiqui, who recently and suddenly passed away on January 7th, 2024. Khalid's work focused on a 5-year participatory research project on adolescent sexual and reproductive health in the Bauchi State, Nigeria, under the supervision of Dr. Anne Cockcroft, who is here with us today. His research project focused on devising and evaluating methods to engage local stakeholders in participatory analysis and interpretation of research data. He was recently awarded a Health Systems Impact Fellowship by the CIHR in November 2023. Thus, we remember and celebrate the life and contributions of our dear colleague, Khalid Umair Siddiqui. So for today's research webinar, I would like to introduce Dr. Meredith Vanstone, an associate professor in the Department of Family Medicine at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario. She holds a research chair in ethical complexity in primary care, and Dr. Vanstone has experience as both an interdisciplinary doctoral student and supervisor. Today, she will be discussing interdisciplinary doctoral supervision through a facilitated discussion about how to best support doctoral students engaged in interdisciplinary research. So questions and comments from the audience can be posted on the chat, or people can raise their hands. This webinar will be recorded and will be end at 1:30. And for those who do not wish to be recorded, please turn off your video. And without further ado, Dr. Meredith Vanstone.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me today. And I'll also invite you just to ask your questions. I know sometimes when I have the slides up, I can't monitor the chat or the hands very easily. So feel free to just speak out and ask your question or raise the issue that you would like to. I've built the presentation with a little bit of flexibility in terms of how much I'm talking and how much we're discussing, depending on people's interests and if you're trying to eat your lunch or do something else. So we can kind of play it by ear and see how things go. Are you seeing my slides? Does it all looks fine? Okay, great. So I'm going to start out a little bit more talking at you with some terms and some concepts that will be important to our discussion about interdisciplinary doctoral supervision. And then we've got a bit of flexibility to talk about some of the challenges and some of the joys that you've experienced as students, as supervisors. I have a little bit of data from some quite old projects now that I'll try to weave in, and a little bit of data from the literature. And then if we have time, we can turn to the question of what does it look like to do this well, or what might we be striving for. But I think that theme will be present in the whole presentation. So I'm going to introduce myself in a few minutes, but I think I'm going to talk a little bit about what's a discipline, what's an interdiscipline, what does it mean to be doing this work before I talk about myself and my own disciplinary and interdisciplinary background. So A discipline is a branch or field of study of specialized training. It has its own knowledge, discourse, language. It's really a social group. There's sort of a cultural aspect to each discipline. There are traditions of inquiry. There are different modes or methods of inquiry. And also there's sort of social agreement within this disciplinary group about what counts as knowledge, what counts as new knowledge, what counts as rigorous methods to obtain that knowledge from. And I like this definition from Julie Thompson-Klein, who's a scholar who's written a lot about interdisciplinary science. She says that discipline is not a neat category, and disciplines vary in the way they structure themselves, establish their identities, regulate and reward practitioners, manage consensus and dissent, and communicate. So I think really a focus on the social aspect of knowledge creation and of knowing. And of course, interdisciplinary, there's so many different ways of integrating knowledge from multiple disciplines. And Thompson-Klein has this whole typology. It's kind of evolved over probably about 3 decades of her scientific work. I'm not sure that it's really important for us today to get into what are the specific nuances between all of these different ways of thinking about interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary. But I think it is important to kind of recognize that there are different ways of working between or across disciplines and different models of how this might happen. But across all of them, there's sort of this common goal of integrating knowledge or modes of thinking in 2 or more disciplines or established areas of expertise to produce some kind of advancement in knowledge that wouldn't have been possible if we were just working in a single disciplinary way. And I'll give you one example just about how the different ways that this could happen. So for the sake of illustration, I'm going to contrast interdisciplinary ways of working and transdisciplinary ways of working. And I'm going to do this with a food metaphor because I love metaphors. So definitions of interdisciplinary working tend to focus on integration of methods, tools, concepts, and theories from existing disciplines. Sometimes these might result in a new community of practice or a new field. We might call this an interdiscipline or an interdisciplinary field. And I think medical education is a great example of an interdisciplinary field. But more often, interdisciplinary working as it exists in the scholarship about interdisciplinarity and interdisciplinary supervision is about borrowing from across disciplines. And usually the constituent parts are still recognizable in some form. So in my food metaphor, I'm thinking about like a hamburger with naan bread instead of a traditional hamburger bun, where we can kind of see the constituent parts from these different cuisines. But then in order to make it work, in order to make it tasty, to really sing, we're going to play with the condiments too. So this is not just a hamburger with some ketchup and mustard and, I don't know, lettuce and tomato or whatever the typical hamburger condiments are, but we might have some pickled onions, some cilantro, some kind of chutney, something to kind of go with it. We might switch out the beef for the lamb, really to make something that's coherent, that's more than the sum of its parts, that is something new when you put it together. It gives us something more than we might have gotten if we just sort of mashed up these bits independently. Transdisciplinarity is something different altogether. It's a term that has become aligned with new synthetic paradigms that sort of transcend existing disciplinary approaches to create something new. So as examples here, we might think about general systems theory, feminist theory, post-structuralism, sustainability, something which isn't necessarily tied to a particular discipline and would be kind of hard to pick. Well, there's this part from here and there's this part from here, and they can coexist as they were in their original form in this new thing. It's more that there's something completely new created here. And to bring up my food metaphor into here, I'm going to think of transdisciplinary as high fructose corn syrup, with no, pejorative intent about the nutritional content here. But high fructose corn syrup was a product that was made from conventional corn syrup, but it was made in a lab, and it sort of came about as a completely new product because of the context that existed at the time it was made, which was in the early 1970s. There was a sort of need. At that time, they were experiencing production quotas on domestic sugar. There was import tariffs on foreign sugar, but there was subsidies on corn. And so there was sort of this, like, we've got to create something really sweet that doesn't rely on sugar. We've got all of this corn. It's cheap. It's available. What are we going to do? And then they developed this new product, which went on to span all kinds of additional new products. And so we don't really recognize you know, the constituent parts of high fructose corn syrup. And it doesn't even really matter where it used to come from, because now it's sort of grown into this totally new and different and unusual and unique thing. And that's the spirit of transdisciplinarity as opposed to interdisciplinary. Make sense? I don't know. I'll give a little pause because I know sometimes it's hard to jump in if you have a thought or a question or something you'd like to share with the group. All right. So if working across disciplines is about tackling very tough problems by mixing and matching the tools or the theories or the knowledges of more than one discipline, then today I want to talk about what it means to be a doctoral student working in this way, where you aren't already established as an expert in that discipline, and what it might mean to be a supervisor who's training a doctoral student to work in this way. And as supervisors, how do our own trajectories of education, of disciplinary allegiances, our own approach to knowledge generation shape our supervisory work when we're working in it with doctoral students who are doing interdisciplinary work? And then I'll introduce myself a little bit more now that we've kind of got the idea about disciplines and interdisciplines. So this is a picture of the building that I work. This is where I am right now, although it's not so green and sunny outside today. I'm currently, as you heard before, an associate professor in our Department of Family Medicine, and I also belong to our Center for Health Economics and Policy Analysis here at McMaster. In terms of what type of research work I do or where my own work is, I recently was awarded a Canada Research Chair that's called Ethical Complexity in Primary Care, and that's kind of my way of wrapping up a whole bunch of different projects about the health human workforce, medical education and professional practices, patient experiences, all in elements that have a little bit of an ethical tinge or where there's some sort of dilemma that the clinician or the patient must grapple with. In terms of my supervisory work, I supervise in a bunch of programs. I do a lot of supervision these days. Most of my students are in our health sciences education master's program or a health policy PhD students, although I've also acted as a supervisor in our health research methodology, global health, and health and aging programs. You might notice that none of these are single disciplinary programs. These are all kind of in that interdisciplinary space. But where did I come from? Where is my training? So this is a picture of Western. This is where I did my PhD under the supervision of Ann Kinsella, who I understand that you have the pleasure of working with at McGill over the last couple of years in the Institute of Health Science Education. So I started out as an undergraduate student in, my one monitor has just fallen asleep, and I don't know if that means you can see it or not see it. Okay, it's back in. So as an undergraduate student, I started out in philosophy. I did a degree in philosophy and health studies, and then I went to do my PhD with Anne at Western in health professional education, and came to McMaster after that to do a postdoctoral fellowship in health policy. So again, a bunch of interdisciplines for me here. I think that across my whole trajectory, what I'm doing now, how I trained, how I was educated, it's really just that one bachelor degree in philosophy that looks like a single disciplinary experience. So I've been sort of wading in this swamp of interdisciplinarity for the whole career, and I think that my perspective on what it means to do interdisciplinary supervision is really informed by that, and also informed by the fact that I never really had that experience of being situated within a single discipline. One really generative experience that I had as a doctoral student was I worked with a number of faculty members at Western on a study about interdisciplinary doctoral supervision. So I was sort of the student representative on this. And these are quite old now, but I dug out some data from that study, and we also did a little bit of a follow-up at McMaster with students and supervisors there. So I have a few quotes or a few points that I'll use to illustrate some of the presentation today. As I was preparing for today and kind of revisiting that work, one thing that really struck me was, I don't know if it's just an evolution in my perspective. I think it's an evolution in the field too, particularly around medical education, around family medicine, that there's been this sort of move towards interdisciplinarity, that both of these fields, and health policy as well, 20 years ago were composed of scholars who were trained in a single disciplinary way and who had sort of gravitated into this field for sometimes reasons of interest, sometimes more pragmatic reasons about they were a faculty member at a university that had a project that needed to be done, or some curriculum development or something that needed to happen. And that's how those fields built up, is sort of this foundation of different single disciplinary scholars. But as the fields have become more established, they've been training their own scholars as interdisciplinary scholars in those specific fields. And so I'm an example of that. My PhD is in health professional education. And that, I think, has given a different tinge to the work and to the work of supervision and the experiences of being a doctoral student when your faculty complement starts to be composed more and more of people who have also trained in this way. So I'm going to move us over to Menti for a second. I don't know if you folks are familiar with this. It's just a way that we can kind of participate, gather our ideas together. And what you're going to do is you can take out your phone and use this QR code, or just switch over to your browser and go to menti.com. You're going to enter this code and it will bring up some slides. And the first question that it's going to ask you, I'm going to switch over here so that we can all see it. The first question it's going to ask you is about your own interdisciplinary training. So you'll see my 3 responses on the slide here about the disciplines that I trained in. And as you start to add your own, we will have a little bit of a word cloud happening about where this group has done their training. Yeah, okay, it's working for working for at least some people. Another philosopher. And feel free to speak out as you're observing patterns or seeing what's happening with this word cloud as people are filling it in. So a few others who've trained in health professional education, that looks like a bigger theme. And then of course, this is just kind of a simple assemblage. And so family medicine and primary care, maybe these are similar training programs and maybe not, but the program's not going to group it together for us. We will have to do that sort of synthesis on our own. And so I'm curious about some of these responses, like HIV, women's health. Was that the name of your degree program, or was that the focus, like your sort of individual focus of your studies?
I can say that it was a focus of my PhD work, the research program that I took on.
Okay, and what was the degree program called that you did that work in?
The degree program is called the PhD in Family Medicine and Primary Care at McGill.
Okay. Great, yeah. So if we think about what are the degree programs, sometimes they are quite related to the work that we're doing, sometimes a little bit different. Okay, I think we've got everybody's responses in here. And so I'm seeing some multiple people have done health professional education, rehab, some family medicine, primary care stuff, and then some general, I'm guessing these are undergrads because this is what our McMaster undergrad programs look like, health sciences, health studies, that kind of thing. So now we're going to go to the next slide, and this asks, oh, sorry, I'm going to stop that. I'm going to go back to the slides because I thought I had one that asks, what are the programs that you're supervising in? So how we could just maybe speak out if people would like to discuss, but what's the distance been between where you trained? So for me, training in philosophy at first, and then ending up supervising in a health policy PhD program, in a health research methodology PhD program. Does anyone else want to share how close or how far apart was their training, or was their to their supervision or their current academic work as faculty members?
I mean, I would be happy to do that. I think I have a trajectory that is maybe a bit more similar to yours, Meredith, than most people in the room, however. I did my undergrad. I did what U of T calls a specialist in sociocultural anthropology and a major in philosophy with a minor in comparative literature. And the reason why I was able to do all that was because there were several courses that were cross-listed between philosophy and anthropology, specifically around particular systems of thought. And then my master's and PhD were all in anthropology, but my research increasingly had a health focus. And then I did a postdoc, started in family and community medicine at U of T. And then when my supervisor moved to the Dalalana School of Public Health, I moved with her. So now my primary home is obviously here in family medicine, and that is where I supervise, but I have an associate status in the Department of Anthropology and Social Studies of Medicine, and also most recently in the School of Population and Global Health here.
Yep. Great. So eclectic and a movement. I think, Kate, your trajectory sounds very similar to the way that a lot of sort of family medicine, primary care stuff comes together. Yeah. Is anyone really closely aligned in where they trained and the supervision work that they do now? Trained in family medicine, supervised in family medicine, that kind of a trajectory.
Yes, Roland is there.
Oh, hi.
Has raised his hand. Okay.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I can't see any of the hands, so just go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, hi Meredith. It's Roland Grad. We've met at NAPCRAG before.
Yeah.
It's nice to see you. So I'm trained in family medicine at McGill and then became a family doctor, joined the department, and after 8 years went back to school at McMaster to do the design, measurement, and evaluation program, which was the precursor to HRM. And that was more quantitative. You know, although I took a course with Kathy Charles because I realized even then that not all the research I was interested in was going to be epidemiology and biostats. And it has evolved, you know, even more away from that. So I don't think of myself as an epidemiologist. I think of myself as a practicing family doctor who has an academic habit, and that academic habit involves supervising, you know, at the master's level. So I've gotten involved in medical education research because my department is very interested in medical education, and it's quite a distance, in a sense, from what I trained in. So look, I'm very interested in this question, so thanks for asking.
Yeah, and I think nice to have this, just a quick representation of this group of folks who are interested in family medicine education, but all of the different places that we come from, the places that we're drawing our knowledge from. Yeah, Chara.
Yes, I think I have a professional trajectory that is somehow in the middle between Roland and Kate. So I studied medicine in Spain and I work as a GP for 7 years. But I have always been interested in management. So after that period or during that period of professional clinical practice, I studied public health management. And before coming here in Canada, I work as a manager. I arrived here to study, to undertake my doctoral studies at the Université de Montréal, Public Health Management, Organization of Healthcare Delivery Systems. And then I was hired in the Department of Family Medicine to develop health service research related to family medicine and family medicine organizations, okay? And as Roland, I have become interested over the last 15 years in medical education, not because I had a previous training on that, but because of the whole development that we have undertaken in the Department of Family Medicine, creating new graduate programs, because the motto at that time was research capacity building, and we wanted to train future researchers in family medicine to contribute to family medicine scholarship. So I think I'm somehow in the middle between Kate and Roland, as I said before. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I don't see anybody else clamoring to tell us. So I'll switch back over here and then we'll come back later. Oh, sorry. We've got too many monitors and too many programs on the go. There we are. Okay. So disciplinary homes. We've just learned that we've got a variety of places where we come from, some of which were single disciplinary, but lots of which were already sort of interdisciplinary at the very beginning. And I think as scholars engaged in medical education and family medicine, we probably all identify as having an interdisciplinary home to our work now. Maybe some of you also have another single discipline that you're currently working in. But I can think back to being a doctoral student and being kind of flummoxed by this idea, like studying interdisciplinarity and thinking like, where is my disciplinary home? And feeling like I didn't really have one, because the only single discipline on my CV is philosophy, which definitely wasn't really even resonant with the work I did in my PhD. Also not particularly relevant to the work that I'm doing today. But a lot of the scholarship about interdisciplinarity really relies on this idea of we have a single disciplinary home, and then we leave that discipline, we leave that home, we come out and play somewhere in the middle where the work that we do together happens outside of any of these single disciplines. And I think that this model, whenever you read about people's experiences doing interdisciplinary doctoral supervision, being a student in this model, it is always sort of, there's this implicit premise that you've got somewhere to go back to. And sometimes that's positive, sometimes that's about a place to belong and a place you feel comfortable and this kind of thing. And sometimes it's negative about this is a different standard by which you're going to be evaluated. You also need to perform to publish in these journals to, you know, get a book contract or have a single author publication. And so it's just kind of underlying all of this, I think. And it can result in feelings of being pulled in multiple directions, sometimes by committee members. And in our data from Western and from McMaster, this is all at least a decade old now, the students would usually talk about this as their committee members, but in the faculty data, and I think we could also read implicitly that it's not just committee members, it's the disciplines themselves, it's the way that these different places understand the work of knowledge creation, of research. And so here's a little quote from one of those PhD students who's talking about their committee, that each of them has their own expertise in one component of what the student is doing, and there's sort of this natural tendency to pull in the direction where their expertise is. And then the student feels like they're having to bring them into the same ground and to sort of pull back on these committee members to create some common ground, to bridge some of those gaps, so that they all can feel comfortable in the work that they're doing together. And then the student describes themselves as feeling like a little bit of a go-between, like they're trying to reconcile themselves from what's coming from all of these different directions. And I think that this was just such a like a really evocative example about being pulled and having to push back and create a common ground in the middle. Julie Thompson Klein still is writing about this, like she's got, I think, probably 30 years of work about interdisciplinarity. And in one of her recent writings about discourses of interdisciplinary, she helps us recognize the presence of all of these spatial metaphors of knowledge creation. That often when we're talking about working in an interdisciplinary way, we use discourse which accentuates our understandings of disciplines as having boundaries and borderlands, of domains, of territories, of fiefdoms that are demarcated by turf, of silos, like these sort of really physical metaphors about what belongs where and where the borders are and where are the boundaries. And that doesn't always help us to understand the different ways that we might work between, work together, work across. And when I looked back at our interviews with the doctoral students, I could really see this idea of boundary and physical separation as a source of challenge and struggle for them. They used metaphors of islands or separate worlds needing to inhabit or to contribute to two places at once, a requirement which felt really, really difficult for them. And I think there's sort of these metaphors of the disciplines being an island or of needing to be in two places at once, contribute to two separate things. It makes it harder for these students to see that there's a middle ground, that there's something new that can be created. Like when we get stuck in these physical metaphors about place and boundaries and borders and silos, it maybe abbreviates our understanding of a different way to do it, where there is sort of more of a combination or a synthesis. possible. And here's a quote from one of those students who said, I think the biggest thing for me, the biggest challenge is how you can make a contribution to both disciplines at the same time. It always feels like the risk I'm running here is trying to engage with both, but end up satisfying neither. And this feels to me like there's this real implicit assumption of this, I'm going to call it the cul-de-sac model of the single disciplinary homes, and you come out and you play in the middle, but then you go back and you retreat and you've got somewhere else. And we heard back in 2010 or whenever we conducted these interviews from the faculty members, sort of a same theme, that they often felt like their interdisciplinary supervision was like volunteer work. This was a hobby. This was sometimes it was really fun. Sometimes it was really enriching. They got to meet new colleagues across the university. They got to work on projects which were exciting to them, to apply their theoretical knowledge in a whole new context. But it didn't feel like it counted as their work because their home department didn't really care about this work. They weren't publishing in the journals that counted for their home department. They weren't maybe publishing the types of products that counted for their home department. And we just heard over and over and over again that the supervisors engaged in this interdisciplinary work because it was fun, because it was enjoyable, because it felt generative. It was a place to play for them, but it was hardly ever, for most people, they didn't describe it as their main work. They still had to go home and to contribute somewhere else at the end of the day. But this model of interdisciplinarity, of having this home discipline that you leave and you return to, I think it still exists, but I know for me at McMaster and in the programs that I supervise in, this is not how it tends to work for us. We do have these sort of academic administrative units of our departments, but that's different from a discipline, because in my faculty of the Faculty of Health Sciences at McMaster, our departments are family medicine, internal medicine, psychiatry, rather than sociology, psychology, economics, where there's also sort of this disciplinary structure overlaid the administrative one. And so as a result, for me, in my experience, this cul-de-sac thing doesn't really happen. My department chair is quite happy if I'm working with a colleague in internal medicine and another one in oncology to do some project that's relevant to all of us. We're sort of aiming for the same things. We're evaluated by the same metrics. The journals that we're trying to publish in many ways are similar ones. We're not going to have a publication in one journal that the chair of oncology thinks is worthless and the chair of family medicine thinks is the best, the best place you could possibly publish. Obviously, there's some priorities. There's some, oh, that's really, that's great to publish in the Annals of Family Medicine, really, really wonderful. But it doesn't seem to be as difficult as we heard from people who do this work in other academic contexts, where they are kind of operating in this in this cul-de-sac, single disciplinary, come out and play in the middle for your interdisciplinary work model. And I wonder at McGill if this description is resonant with you, if you feel like you're doing your supervision in this cul-de-sac model, or if you feel like this is more of a broader health sciences space where there's maybe a little bit more freedom.
Sorry, there is a comment from Dr. Cockcroft stating that when people ask me what is my discipline, I find it very difficult to answer. My work in participatory research is perhaps inherently interdisciplinary. Community members don't see things in terms of discipline.
Yes, great example. I like that observation of the patients or community members don't see things in terms of discipline. Yes, this is absolutely an academic construct that matters more within the university than anywhere else, which it probably doesn't matter at all. Yeah, Charo, I see your hand is up.
Yes, I think you have pointed out a very interesting issue. You are talking about disciplines, but there are also field of inquirers. And to me, health policy is a field of inquiry. Health professions education or health science education is a field of inquiry that it has already been fed by different single disciplines. And family medicine is a medical specialty that is fed by biomedical science, but also because of the way that family physicians practice, is also enriched by other disciplines. So, and then over that, there are the structure in academia that divide scholars in different departments or academic units. I don't know if my colleagues have the same impression, but the 3 areas that you have at McGill apply for departmental structures, because we have a Department of Health Policy in the School of Population and Global Health, we have the Institute of Science Education, we have the Department of Family Medicine, but they are very intertwined. So there are different structures that are overlapping in your speech. Field of inquiries, disciplines, academic units, okay? And then my question, and it's the question that has been in my mind for several years, is how to contribute the question that the student, PhD student said, how I can make a meaningful contribution to a field, an area of knowledge that has practitioners, and the knowledge that I'm generating as a scholar should be helpful, not only for advancing theory in that field, but also for improving their practice. So I don't know, I don't have an answer at all, but actually it's for that I invite you to the next presentation.
Yeah, I don't have an answer either, but I was observing when I was listening to you that I think that the individual administrative contexts of our work probably affect this experience so much. Like for us, health policy, medical education, these are not, at McMaster, they do not have departmental status. And so they are, I understand what you mean, field of inquiry, interdisciplinary field. I think, you know, both of these fields have a whole sort of canon of literature. They have their own journals, they have conferences, there's expectations about what methods you might use, what's rigorous, what counts as new knowledge. But that our sort of day-to-day experience of doing supervisory work in these areas is probably very colored by the administrative structures that govern that work. Yeah, Kate, why don't you jump in?
Thank you. I mean, I think I have a different kind of answer than Charo. But thinking back to your question, I would say since coming to McGill, I've been very pleasantly surprised at how like supportive and accepting our department is of the interdisciplinary backgrounds that we bring to bear. And I've certainly never felt since joining the department that, I mean, if there's anyone who is questioning the value of the social science background that I bring here, they've certainly been very careful to never make that clear to me. So I have really felt that that we do have a real appreciation for the fact that we're more than the sum of our parts when we are working together. At the same time, I do feel that because family medicine is a medical home, the conventions of what is expected in terms of like publishing and what is valued in terms of output are shaped by what is normative in medicine and what is normative in, for instance, anthropology, where I did most of my training, isn't really on most people's radar. And the big thing that I find as a supervisor that I still really grapple with is the convention of multi-authored publishing and having yourself as an author on all your graduate students' papers, which is something that never, ever, ever happens in the Department of Anthropology. And my students are always astonished to discover that I have 0 publications with my doctoral supervisors and never will, you know? And so I still have this like ick feeling when I'm getting myself onto a student's publication, even though I know it's what they expect and what is expected here. And I'm not really sure exactly how to deal with that. And then the other piece is I do find that I sometimes have to be more productive than I would be expected to be in a Department of Anthropology, because I have these ideas of what is a valued output that I brought with me from my training, but they're sometimes misaligned with what medicine values. So for instance, like I had a dissertation-based book that came out last year, and in an anthropology department, that would be like, well, now you've got tenure. Like the book is the thing that you need to get tenure. And that's not, I don't think, people have certainly been very proud of me for publishing this book, but it doesn't carry the same weight in medicine, of course.
Yeah, those are some great topics of I don't know, sites of struggle maybe in this interdisciplinary world. I wonder if others want to talk about this authorship issue, because I think you've given us a really great example of these sort of social norms, expectations, conventions, where there might be direct conflict, either in movement from doing your education in one place and then landing as a faculty member or supervisor in another place, or if you are a student and you have committee members who have different expectations about who's going to be an author, what types of contribution warrant authorship, how are we going to decide on the order, what does it mean to be an author, what is the level of expectation or the level of contribution that's expected of you. I think that it's an example that we probably all deal with, where a lot of these issues kind of come to a head. Yeah, Tara?
Yeah, but jumping on what Kate has said, I think there are two focus here. One thing is what that means to be a scholar nowadays in an academic unit that is in family medicine is clinical and academic, okay? And how I live with that. What are the rules that will determine how I work, okay? And what is my academic productivity? And I agree with you. I have been prodean in many different thesis defense, and I always choose a discipline that is very far from family medicine and medical education. And in history, for example, as you say, Kate, the doctoral student, the candidate, publish a book with his or her dissertation alone, without the supervisor, and is more rewarded, is known in social science, to publish books that scholarly articles, okay? This is one thing. The other thing, and is the thing, and that I think is negotiable, and it can change over time. What worries me is the contribution to knowledge. How we can make meaningful contributions when we are in the middle of these crossroads of field of inquirers, pure disciplines, academic structures, okay? Is what I feel worried about. When in a thesis defense in our department, I ask the candidate, what is the contribution of your work to the advancement of science and practice in family medicine? And the student doesn't answer, I'm worried about it. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. So it's what worries me. We are in the business of knowledge generation. To what we are contributing in a meaningful way is what I'm worried about. I will stop here. Sorry.
I think it's a great question. And I've seen a couple of things in the chat as well. I don't know if it looks like folks are addressing each other there, so I think maybe we don't need to talk about it. But yes, this having a letter of agreement at the very beginning, I think that's a great format to start out. How are we going to work together? What are what are our individual understandings of the standards here, and where might we need to negotiate, where might we compromise, and if we have to make a difficult decision, where that's going to come from. I don't think I've ever been involved in a committee that's done that as a whole committee exercise, but it feels like a great idea. I will often do that with my students. I have like a little sort of document to start out with that each student and I will go through and add and edit to make it specific to our own relationship, and then it's sort of a contract between the two of us, but I've never done it with the whole committee. So that could be a great idea. Thank you.
Meredith, time flies, so I think you have more slides to share with us. So
I do, yeah, but I'm not worried about getting through all of it, because I think it's better to have questions and discussion. Are there any things that people would like me to jump to, or you were hoping we were going to talk about that might help choose where to go over the next 10 minutes or so?
I just noticed that Dr. Kinsella shared a PDF in the chat box stating that here are some of guidelines that are helpful for determining authorship that many journals are using. For example, advances in health sciences education.
Great. Yes, thank you.
I don't know if you've heard of that. Hi, Meredith. It's
Hi,
nice
Ann.
to meet you. I'm sorry I joined a little bit late, but this is a great talk and really great to hear. These guidelines have been helpful for some of the research teams that I've been involved in terms of helping to decide what constitutes authorship. This particular one that I posted in the chat has been highlighted by one of my colleagues who was circulating them. So sorry that it's highlighted, but it can be useful as a starting point for dialogue about those discussions at any rate. But great conversations, and I agree that Kate, great points about, for instance, in some of the social science disciplines, books and sole authorship is a primary approach, whereas for us, most of us in the health sciences disciplines, it's more of a team that is working on developing the ideas within a research project. So they're really great conversations and important. Thank you.
Yeah, those guidelines are very influential, the ICGME within the health sciences. That's a helpful resource. But then sometimes you might be working with someone who's coming from a different group altogether. So I have some colleagues in economics, and the convention there is that the authors are listed alphabetically. So no qualms about multi-author publications, although they tend to be smaller teams than we have in the health sciences. But there's no sort of order by contribution, no concept of a senior author, like it is just an alphabetical listing. So again, kind of a different way about how are we going to work here, because I certainly am familiar with it's almost sort of a norm at this point of the first author takes more of a leadership role and is often chasing some of those co-authors, sometimes with the help of the senior author, but a lot of the time you need to corral and herd those co-authors together to make the contribution that they might have agreed to make at the beginning, or to follow up with things. And I'm not sure, I've never been on a mainly economics team where there is no or there's a different way of designating who the project leader is, and who's maybe more of a contributor rather than a driving force. Yeah, Isabel.
Fantastic talk. Thank you, Meredith. Beyond the order of authors, what is sometimes difficult to manage in interdisciplinary teams? So I will give my example. I work a lot with the Faculty of Management. And typically at the Faculty of Management, they publish one paper a year or one paper every 2 years with 60 pages and 3 authors. And then when you collaborate with them, okay, it's a lot of work, 60 pages. You have to delete a lot of authors, including many student, research assistant, patient partners, clinicians who recruit patients, let's say, and it's quite complicated because this type of paper is such a huge work with a small number of authors, which is not at all the tradition in medicine. And then when you submit your CV to let's say for tenure or for a promotion, it counts as the same as a paper that is 3 pages, So there is some education to do as well in the promotion committees, to really understand that the weight of a paper with 3 authors, 60 pages is not the same. It's the same with books and those kind of things. It takes so long time to write. So I'm not sure we are yet there to recognize and encourage interdisciplinary work with our careers. It's really challenging. I find it really challenging.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I have one small strategy for this as a supervisor, and that's when my students are applying for scholarships or for academic positions, when I'm in the place to write a reference letter, that's where I do a lot of that translation work. And I think there's a great opportunity for us as supervisors to do that education through the reference letter process for our students. But that's only one small opportunity, right? I agree that this is probably more of a challenge when you're a faculty member, you're coming up on promotion, or you're being evaluated as an independent academic, where you maybe don't have somebody in that supervisory mentorship position who has the opportunity to do that kind of advocacy. But I'm starting to see, like, as interdisciplinary ways of working become more common, I'm starting to see some structures that are built for this kind of thing. So CIHR recently, like in the last few years, has introduced, they call it a summary of progress, but you contribute, I think it's 2 pages, about what you've done so far on this topic, other projects, other funding, you know, what you bring. And that provides an opportunity to contextualize the work that you've done that might be unfamiliar to the reviewers. Same with the most significant contributions part that you submit for CIHR, or NSERC has, I think they call it Form 101 or something, but it's quite an open format form where it's not just about, here are the things I'm listing grants, I'm listing publications, but a free text, these are my contributions, this is the work that I've done, and this is the group that's impacting, or these are the influences of the work that I've done. So I think there are a few opportunities for us to do this, but it does seem to rest on our shoulders to sort of do it proactively, in a way that if we were all just working in a very single discipline, we could rely on our reviewers or the people who are scrutinizing our work to kind of know what was going on in a different way. I have a few more challenges that we might talk about if we want to take the last few minutes for that, or if somebody else has another topic they'd like to raise. I think that there's some great perspectives on doing this work from all kinds of different vantage points in this group. Okay, I'll give you two minutes on challenges, and then we'll wrap it up. All of the challenges in 2 minutes. That feels ambitious. So this is just a little graphic that came from that scoping review, where we reviewed all kinds of existing literature about the challenges of doing interdisciplinary supervision, and then created these different versions of what it would look like for students, and then there's another one for supervisors. But we've grouped them as intellectual and scholarly issues around managing supervisors and committee members, of finding an academic community or belonging, of structural or institutional issues. And so many of these are like documented quite widely, and but I think also, like, they really rely on that model of the single disciplinary home, and that I think this looks quite different when we move into more interdisciplinary spaces of working, and where I think the question that Charo raised for us earlier about who are we contributing to? What is the contribution we're making? What is the impact of the work? That these maybe become more of the wicked problems that we need to encounter, rather than what are the structures that are guiding us. Does anybody have any kind of last thoughts before we conclude, or any thoughts that they'd like to share with the group?
I just want to thank you for presenting this topic, because I'm a family physician, and we do a lot of interdisciplinary work in family medicine. But in the academic realm, well, in the clinical and in the academic realms, I would say there's so much promotion of interdisciplinarity, but very few people actually stop, as you have gotten us to do today, to think really about the challenges and the difficulties of doing this. And I know certainly in the clinical realm, I've worked at an organization called La Maison Bleue, where we are nurses, physicians, midwives, social workers, and so on, all working together. And even the same words mean different things to us. So we always, the patients were always supposed to have this plan d'intervention, an intervention plan. And like, it meant a completely different thing across different disciplines. And we had to have this big discussion about what was it going to look like. And certainly the issues you brought up now about how this affects academia. I mean, I really feel like our department structure is kind of a remnant of the last century when I hear like what you're talking about, because so much of the interesting work happens when different disciplines get together, and yet university structures haven't changed in like, 100 years. So I feel like there needs to be some conversations about that as we move into, the next century of academia.
And I could build on what Mario has said. I think that very few people will deny now the interest of interdisciplinarity that is related to Boyer's scholarship of integration. How you integrate what you are doing in a bigger picture, always talking about knowledge. My question is how we can manage that in a meaningful way if we consider that field of inquiries or disciplinary's identity is still valuable. How to manage both things, to take the best from interdisciplinary approaches for learning, for teaching, for practicing, but at the same time, what is our identity? As scholars, as professionals, what is the balance? And I think, at least, I think we are in the middle of that now, in that discussion. And okay, I think I will invite you again in a year or so, because anyways, I will leave Raymond and Sima to close the seminar, but it has been a terrific discussion, and I'm very thankful for you to accept our invitation.
Thank you for the invitation.
So unfortunately, we've reached the end of our webinar. Thank you, Dr. Vanstone, for joining us today and sharing your work about interdisciplinary doctoral supervision. And yeah, so please join us next time for our next FMER Advanced Research Webinar. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, yes, on March 29th with Dr. Arch Maynus, is the deputy editor of the journal Family Medicine. He will be talking about how to publish in this major journal in family medicine education. Once again, thank you so much, Meredith, and thank you everybody for attending this event.
Yeah, thank you,
Meredith.
for all your ideas. Yeah.
Thank you, Will.